Oh, hey, I went to the wrong link. I
Oh,
clicked
I
on.
apologize that, yeah, I switched it from my work link to my Zoom to my home link.
Oh, yeah, no worries at all. So, how are you doing?
Good. It's been a long week, but I think the worst of it is over. So looking
Very
forward
good news.
to catching my breath and catching up. So, um, should we get started?
Yeah.
All right. So I don't know if you had a chance to look at the list of questions I sent you. It was just kind of a nothing terribly detailed, but just sort of actually, let me just start by praying. Let's go there first.
Okay.
God, I just thank you for Todd and the extraordinary journey you've taken him on, and that you've uniquely gifted him to share your love and your light with those who are not comfortable with the traditional ways of talking about you and experiencing you. And that you've given him unique experiences and a powerful calling. And Lord, I pray that we would cultivate that during this time. We would encourage one another. We would see each other. We would see you. And we'd see how we can grow ourselves so that we can better grow others to grow your kingdom. I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I think I'll start with I have three questions I always ask when I first meet people. And this time I'll actually go first to make it easy. The questions are, where were you born? What did you study? And how did you end up here? So real
Okay.
quickly, well, you can think about that for a bit, but I was born in Chicago right after my parents arrived from India. And I think I may have shared some of this on our interview. And I studied physics and theology because I was trying to find absolutes. And after I got my PhD in physics, I ended up doing management consulting for 2 years. And then I ended up joining Apple in 1999 when Steve Jobs came back. I thought it was just going to be a couple of years. It lasted 15 years in product marketing and another 2 years in evangelism, which was very confusing because I was also head of the Apple Christian Fellowship. And I was working at Apple's technology evangelism group. So people, and my boss was actually a Christian, and his boss was actually the executive sponsor of the Apple Christian Fellowship. So they say, wait, so are you actually paid to be an evangelist? I say, yes, but not what you think, although sort of. Anyway, um, I left in my midlife crisis to go do a startup and ended up having an extraordinary series of experiences. And a big part of that, which is kind of what brought me here, is I love the church. I love the history of Christianity precisely because it is so ugly, messy, hypocritical, and violent, just like the Bible.
Hmm.
And we're nothing without our tradition, but our tradition is the thing that we have to overcome for the new thing that God does next. We have to embrace it and overcome it rather than run away from it or get stuck in it. So
That's
that's
a good
kind of my
point.
perspective on things. And so I've been doing this for a while, and I'm extraordinarily privileged with my family background and my history. And so I've always had a passion for trying to understand where people are in their journey, especially people who are not on the beaten path.
Right.
And say, hey, I've been wandering in the wilderness a little longer. I know where the manna is. Maybe I can help you get to where you're going a little faster. So that's
Okay.
kind of how I got here.
All right. So, what were the three questions again? I'm sorry.
Where were you born? What did you study or what were you trained in? And what brings you here?
Okay. So, I was born in Chester, Pennsylvania, which is just outside of Philadelphia, and I grew up there. I'm now in Georgia near Savannah. So, I moved down here in the middle of 2020. God was reorganizing me. So, I have been a truck driver now for what, 10 years or so.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's what my day job has been. But I've I've since, learned new things and been expanding myself by researching history, researching religion, researching how we got here. And that kind of leads to your next question is I got to where I am by researching where did humanity come from? Why is humanity here? There has to be more than just working, going to school, paying bills, doing these mundane things. There has to be more. And that led me on a spiritual experience of looking into meditation, which healed me in certain aspects, psychedelic experiences, which healed me in certain aspects. And then through learning all of these different mysticisms, I was then saved by Jesus Christ. And since I've been saved by him, I have started my podcast, I've started my YouTube channel and my research. Whereas before I was researching conspiracy theories and just not really anywhere to go with the mysticisms, just in general. I've been guided to try to understand why the things I was learning before aren't true, how I can relate to those people who still think those things are true, and do it in a unique, loving way where I'm not telling someone that they're wrong. I'm not, coming at them, but I'm offering them up something that is true. And I feel that when the spirit speaks, we know the voice, and it doesn't matter the inflection or the tone or the gender of whoever's speaking. The spirit in us can hear the spirit in that person speaking. So sometimes when I say things, it really cuts to the core of people, and there's this immediate, oh, I wanted to learn more about what this guy's talking about because the spirit is speaking through me in so many different ways.
Wow, that is awesome. And so very specifically, it sounded like you've started, I don't know how formally or informally, some sort of counseling or coaching practice where you're meeting with people. So what is
Yeah.
that? How did that start? How's it going?
So when I started my website, I think in like July or August, something like that. Um, it was so I started my podcast in March of 2021, or no, April 2021, and I was getting the hang of it. And every time I start to get the hang of something and one thing, God's like, all right, can you do more? And I'm like, okay, yeah, I can do more. So then it was the website. And then I'm getting a hang of that. And at the time, I had things to my understandings of what I would do and how I would help people because my idea was just that I could help people. I have a grandiose story from prison to now helping people, and I couldn't speak 7 years ago. I would mumble. I couldn't think thoughts because my brain was so drug addled. I was a drug addict for 10 years. And there were many different facets that were not conducive to helping people. I was a very egotistical person. I was very prideful. I was very much in the yelling and making people see my point of view. So I've completely changed. And in that changing, I've realized that I can help people by just speaking because one of the things I had to do for my prison sentence was to go to NA meetings. Not necessarily the NA, but there were certain those types of meetings
So
with a
like Narcotics
counselor.
Anonymous?
Yeah, Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, but they weren't the classical ones. They were ones with a counselor that were, I was mandated to go to these ones. These were run by certain people and facilities and all that. But what it did for me was hearing other people's stories had me relate to them. And then I could then put myself in their position. I could see things in a different way. And that's what I was doing with my podcast. So I was like, okay, I can do this for people. And as I've been getting closer to Christ, the things that I offer have changed, and it is becoming more of just a talk therapy, type of thing. Not only that, but that is a major part of it because I see the benefits that is, and that's really what he's leading me to. So yeah, it came about purposely, but it was before where I came at it from. I was trying to psychically help people, the way mediums and that I didn't do mediumship, I didn't do channelings, but I could do energy work. I could manipulate the energy around me and others, and I could spiritually get inside somebody and help clean them out. But Jesus showed me, that's not the best way to do things, because it's dangerous to me, that I am then inviting things in. I'm doing spiritual warfare on a level that I shouldn't be. So then I backed off from doing that. And as I backed off from doing that, he showed me, well, it's much more beneficial if you just talk to people. So that's what I'm doing now, is mentoring, coaching, helping people through. So I talk to people that I've had a patient, not a patient, I'm sorry, a
Right.
client who has breast cancer. And I
Mm,
was helping her through her decision making. And I'm not, telling her directly to do this or directly to do that. I'm just talking her through her own thoughts. And I've had other people that had gone to like psych wards, and they want to hear. A lot of people just want to be heard, and I'm a fairly good listener, so I can hear people out and I can understand them from their point of view because of my experiences. I can relate to very many people on their
yeah.
level, and just hearing them out really relieves them. And it's what Jesus does for me, is he takes my burdens away. So it's kind of like they're unburdening themselves on me. And
Yeah.
then I give it up to Jesus, and I try getting them to do the same with Jesus. It's not that I have people just necessarily come back to me, but
Yeah.
that's how everything kind of worked out.
Yeah. It's interesting. In theory, that's what I always thought like pastoral counseling was supposed to be, is that you just listen and then you help people come to Jesus. But in practice, I maybe this is also just me. I tend to push people's buttons where they feel very uncomfortable and they need to put me in a box and use one of their existing tools to fix me, because otherwise they feel like they're not living up to their role.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so one of the things I play with words a lot. One of the words that I've been toying with is a word domoganto, which I think is Esperanto for question tamer. The idea that you're not the person who has the answers, but you're the safe place for people to bring hard questions, and then you can sort of help people walk through it so that they can find their own answers with God's help.
Yeah, I love that.
So you mentioned client. Are you actually doing this like a formal business where you're trying to like uh, charge people and have some sort of formal relationship?
Yeah, yeah. So I offer different packages, but it's typically what I'm doing now. It's just $25 for an hour, and some people want to do 2 times a week. Some people do once a week. Some people, it's once in a while.
Yeah,
And some people, it's just they come for the free consultation that I do, and that's all they ever need, because we just do that one session right there. The first one's free,
hmm,
and then if people want to continue to work with me, then then it costs something for the business wise, and that's just an exchange of energy,
yeah,
because I mean it is work. So it's a very weird, strange thing when we're trying to be people of God, but then we're taking money for doing it. It For me, I guess I have this issue with money where I've had it. So for a while I was just doing a lot of things above and beyond for free, because I'm like, it
yeah,
should all be free. But now I'm trying to get into a place where I'm understanding that no, there is a business sense to it, that there is it, and it's not taking advantage of people when we're doing it this way.
yeah. It's interesting. I've wrestled with that at various points along the way and tried different things. I attended a month-long, mostly free workshop called 100X. They did a 31 Days of Wisdom challenge in January. And this guy is like way in the whole success industry, like, hanging out with Tony Robbins and all these people like that. Um, but he made a point, and so the very first session, he said, look, I'm probably going to say some things that offend you, but I encourage you to grow beyond that, because often the things that offend us are precisely the areas we most need to grow in.
Yes.
And so I thought a lot about that in terms of making money. And one point that he made that really resonated with me is that one of the things that we tend to forget is that wisdom does not come cheaply, right? You have paid a heavy price for the lessons you've learned. And part of the Western mindset is, oh, I have suffered so much and had all these hard-earned wisdom. Let me just give this to you so that you don't have to suffer the way I did, right? We want to do that with our kids as well.
Right.
And like, there is truth and generosity in that, but there is also a danger, right? The danger is that we try to give away knowledge for free and people don't pay the price and therefore it doesn't stick.
Right.
And so the way I've been thinking of, so one of the ways I've thought about that that's helped me is like, what is it? Jesus says, I think, or somewhere it says in the Bible, you have no money, come, buy from me pure precious gold. And there's this weird dynamic where those who have the least need to buy wisdom. And trying to figure out how to do that is hard. But I think it's really important to realize that like, it's not enough for them to just sit and have a nice conversation with you, right? There needs to be some sort of spiritual transaction where they are purchasing wisdom.
Right.
And so I think that that was really helpful for me to think about in terms of how we pay. And so I'll do the same thing with you. This first consultation is free, but I have an unusual business model, which is that if you are trying to grow a business, we figure out where you're trying to go, figure out where you are now, and figure out where, with my help, you could get to. And then if you get there, you give me 10% of the increase.
Okay, that's a very good model. I like
Yeah,
that.
and I have the flexibility to do that. And really, a large part of that is also to maintain some sort of ongoing relationship. Like, one of the funny things I've learned is that when I'm doing business with people, we stay in touch, right? When I'm donating to a missionary, they send me cards every month. When I'm working with people, because we have that shared work product, we stay in touch. And even if we have a great relationship, once I leave the company, I'll like totally not stay in touch with them because I don't have that thing to keep us together. So that's something that, and so, okay, so starting there, have you thought about or talked to God about intentionally trying to grow your business or grow your revenue?
So every time that I try, when I get the way that I think that I could grow my business, now that this could be that I'm being one-minded here and completely off base, but I'm trying to promote myself by going on different podcasts, by sharing my story to others. I'm in the middle of wrestling with the idea of how am I going to write this book in between all the things that I'm doing. And I think I'm being called to step away from podcasting as much as I've been so that I can focus on writing. 2 books actually is what keeps coming to me. So I know that's going to be a way to grow it. But when I think that I deserve, I get that prideful sense in me that, oh, I should be going on these bigger podcasts. Why don't they want to hear my story? My story is, it's very expansive.
Yeah.
But I get very prideful and I get upset that I don't get responses or that they don't message me back or however it doesn't go my way. But then God will show me a week, 2 weeks, a month later that's like, oh, you weren't ready for it, but now you are. So just be patient that I'm going to put you there. So I think what I'm being called to now is to put the book out. And I think that people will respect that more because it seems that when you can write your thoughts coherently down in a digestible way in a 200-page book or so, that is more, for whatever reason, that is looked at as more successful than just having a podcast because anyone can go on and speak.
It's what the technical term for it is proof of work.
There you go.
Right, is that you've shown that you've done your homework, you've set them, you're not just riffing off the top of your head. I mean, like I have a PhD and it's mostly useless, but it shows that I was able to sit down and work on a single hard problem for a long time by myself to somebody else's standards.
Right.
And that's a useful thing. It doesn't mean everything, but it means something. And I think it's worth thinking also about, there's different cultural streams. Like in some communities, like I hang out in the charismatic movement. My wife is more deeply involved than I am, but like their primary business model and the way they build relationships is by writing books. So like everyone's got books, everyone's got a book table, everyone's buying books, and they have a culture of reading books. Like you attend to a seminar, you go buy a book, and like it's a thing. And sometimes it's annoying, it has its upsides and its downsides, but it helps keep the community, working together and growing in certain ways. And, just like there's a culture around podcasts. And so one of the things that I think is actually a useful concept, have you heard of the phrase 1,000 true fans?
Not in those terms, but I might know what it's referring to. Can you expand on that?
Sure, yeah. So this came out several years ago, I think, when, so it used to be in the music industry, there were rock stars who made millions of dollars, and then there were people who made no money at all. But, and then with the emergence of YouTube and things like this, and digital tools where you could build your own music easily, you started to get this middle class of musicians who had like not a record deal with millions of dollars, but they could actually work full time.
Right.
And someone wrote a blog post called 1,000 True Fans. If you have 1,000 people, so as a musician,
Sorry,
if you have
could you say that again?
Sorry. If you have 1,000 people who just love your stuff and buy everything you do, every t-shirt, every CD, that's enough to make a living. Not by themselves, but because they'll come to your places and then they'll tell their friends and they become your core. That's your solid audience. And, it works differently in different industries, but the idea is that the second piece of it is a phrase. So one of my gurus that I listen to is a guy named Seth Godin. He's a marketing professional. He was early to the internet, early to a bunch of things. And he spends all his time like teaching people how to make a ruckus, how to, show up in the world emotionally present and change things for the better. But one of the phrases he uses is this idea of a minimum viable audience or the minimum viable community. So one of the things that happens as a freelancer is you tend to have a high customer acquisition cost. Is that every time you have to find a new client, it's a lot of work, and then the next client is all the same work all over again. Mm-hmm. So he says the way that you break that cycle is you find a community that trusts each other's recommendations, and then if you can get one person in that community where it's like, I trust this guy, then you sort of purchased entrance to that community. Right. So it's like there's certain circles of podcasters who all know each other, right? And if one of them has you, or they listen to each other, they respect each other. If one gets you, then the rest of them kind of follow easily.
Right.
And so one thing to think about, and I'm not saying this is easy, but at least I'm trying to give you some tools that might help you think about where you want to go next and see which ones stick, is to think about like a book is a useful thing, but it's kind of heavy and expensive, right? And so you don't want to be schlepping it everywhere. But it'd be worth starting to think about, this is one thing that I've learned the hard way, is that in technology industry, we talk a lot about product market fit. Like what is the product you're building and who are you building it for? But what I've discovered is that the really hard part is actually product market channel fit. It's not just who the consumer is, but how do you get to that consumer? Right. Okay. So if you're trying to reach prisoners, great, there's your market. But what's your channel? Is it podcast? Is it halfway houses? Is it prison ministry? Whatever. Right. And so figuring out which channel that if you got onto it would help you reach your audience. That is one of these things that is not always obvious, but if you can see it, it'll make an exponential difference in your impact. So I guess those are kind of the thoughts I had about growing your business, is thinking about the distribution and communication paths and whether you can tap into something like that.
Well, it's interesting. I just started a Patreon last week. Well, I've had it for like sitting on it for almost a year now, but I haven't done anything with it because I didn't feel that I was ready to do anything with it. So I just really got that up and ready, and I'm promoting it now. So the Patreon as well as my YouTube channel, I'm always promoting that so that when I can get monetized, I do live
Mhm.
shows for that. So yeah, that is uh and what you're saying, I have a core, not 1,000 people obviously, but I do have a core group of people who I communicate with often. They'll send me emails or they'll DM me or whatever, and we talk about, they're telling me how much it's helping them, and they're listening to all my stuff, and they're sending it to all their friends. So I really understand that, like, what I'm doing, it reaches a certain people, and that those people will then help expand it uh when it's time for it, when they're called to do it, because they're hearing a certain thing that, oh, this will help my mom, this will help my cousin, this will help my brother, so on and so forth. So I'm really trying to harness my relationships with all the people that come in contact with me, that
Mhm.
I am open and I'm trying to help them, because I want to present myself as someone who I am on air is who I am, and
Right.
I want them to be comfortable with me. So I just try to be who I am all the time, and I try to get that core that I have to come with me wherever when I go. I'm a guest on podcasts often, and
Right.
I'll tweet that out or whatever, and then a bunch of my listeners will go listen to it, and it makes me feel good when someone messages me and they say, "Hey, I heard you on this podcast, this podcast, this podcast. Like, I've really been enjoying your stuff," and I'm
Mhm.
like, "Oh well," like just an amazing feeling. So
Yeah.
I really do want to get that core down, and I think the Patreon, because what I'm going to do with the Patreon is have live Q&A sessions with people. That's like my $5 tier right now is the most expensive one, and I'm going to
Yeah.
do live Q&As every week, so that'll entice people to come on, especially if I'm not going to be podcasting as much.
Mhm.
That'll be a way to stay in touch and still have my voice out there. So
Yeah.
I think that'll be a big boom for me.
Yeah. So it sounds like, uh, if I can just sort of wrap my head around the phases. So the top priority for now is finishing the book, and then the
Well,
secondary,
starting.
starting the book. Okay, and then the um, secondary one is maintaining connections with the existing community that you have relationships and brand with, if you will. And
Yeah.
those are the two priorities. Okay, I think here's the thing that I would strongly urge you to think about. Um, is what is your distribution strategy for the book? Because
Okay.
there's two things that a book needs. It needs people to read it, and it needs people to find it.
Hmm.
And most of the time, sort of the rookie mistake authors make is they have a picture of the reader in their head and they design it for that reader, which is wonderful. But they haven't thought about who's the publisher. And the publisher could be you, or it could be somebody else. But if you don't have a publisher, and I have to say, right, like anybody with a pen can write a book,
Mm-hmm.
but to actually have an impact, you have to publish it. You have to distribute it, you have to advertise it, you have to promote it. And there's a bazillion ways to do that. But if you can spend at least a weekend before you write the book to think like a publisher, then you have a better chance of designing a book that is easy to publish.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right? It's like a producer in the movie, right? The producer doesn't do much, but A, they pony up the money ahead of time, and B, they line up the distribution. And so they can say if something's going over budget, whether it's worth it or not, and they can say, look, I know you love that scene, but the distributor will hate it. You got to cut that scene because it's going to offend this part of the audience. And so thinking about, and maybe that wouldn't even be a bad thing for us to do the last 30 minutes now, is thinking about who do you think would most benefit from this book? Like, who's your sweet spot of your target audience?
Like the self-help, I think, audience would be,
Okay, so
uh,
so that's the demographic is self-help.
yeah,
Within that demographic, we call it a persona. Like,
okay.
who do you think is the person who is who will love this book more than anything else he could find in that section? What's the uniqueness about your book that would grab people, say, oh my God, I've read so many help books, but this is the one for me because of X?
Well, I think so with my memoirs, that would be the first thing that I wrote. That would be, and would be the self-help. I think that it's, I've been through so many different things that it jumps out at people: the sexual trauma, the prison, the narcissist, mother, uh the narcissist, ex-fiance who did what she did. There's so many different things that I can relate to the guy in prison or just fresh out of prison. I can relate to the single mother because I was a single father who was in an abusive relationship. I can relate to uh anyone who's been through sexual trauma as a young child or in a relationship with a significant other.
Right.
So I think that I don't really have a specific type of person in mind
Well, let's
because
back up
it
there. And I
reaches
think
so
what's
many.
interesting is that so you can relate to all of them.
Right,
Not all of them can relate to you because you've
right,
had so people who have had multiple layered traumas can identify with you. So that's an interesting point, right? People who just
okay,
had one trauma will probably be overwhelmed by you.
okay,
So people, and certainly a lot of people in prison are there because of multiple layered traumas. But
right,
that's worth thinking about. And that I think is so so you have an intersection point. One is you've had multiple layered traumas, which is fairly rare, right? Not that rare, unfortunately. But secondly, you have also overcome those traumas, right? And I think that's sort of the Venn diagram, if you will. There's lots of people in self-help section who have amazing transformational stories of what they've overcome, but relatively few of them have come from multiple layered traumas. The other thing that I think is really interesting about your story is a lot of people, they go through the multiple layered traumas, they go out of prison, and then they follow a conventional path,
mm-hmm,
right? They go to seminary, they get a degree, they have this, um, prestige and status, that they can go around doing these things. I would argue that one of your distinctives and perhaps your superpower is that you are not that.
I'm not conventional.
You're not conventional and you're not, um, what's the right word? Such as you're not conventional. And I think you'll take this right way. You're not a high status individual.
Mm-hmm.
You don't show up in the suits at the convention centers to the big
I'm the
crowd.
regular guy.
You're a regular guy, yes. And like it is really rare. I think that intersection of those three things is your sweet spot. People who've had
Mm-hmm.
multiple traumas and who've overcome to the point of wanting to help others as a regular guy, not as a superstar, not as a guru, but as a guy who's just been really hollowed out and filled with Jesus. It's more like Peter the fisherman than Paul the Pharisee.
Right.
And we have a lot of, not necessarily meaning to be pejorative, although it could be, we have a lot of Pharisees, people of all the education, like me, have all the education, all the background, all this stuff, and telling people what to do because we can. And like, there's some value in that, but I think that your uniqueness is that you are not that.
Yeah, I'm a
You're,
commoner.
you're a commoner, right? Um, um,
And I think I thrive off of that because I don't want to uh be looked upon as, I don't want to get a degree in something. I don't want to
yeah,
be noticed for anything particular. I like to be a man of the people, so to speak.
yeah, I love that phrase. Actually, that really stuck me. I mean, that I don't know if you want to use that in the branding or not, but the idea of um, the uncommon commoner or commoner grace. So that's the thing that the like this is a exercise that I would recommend you consider which is you write the press release for the book before you write the book. I think
Okay.
Jeff Bezos does this, right? Is like in one page, 14-point font, you write like, this is the book, this is why it was written, and this is who should read it, right? And I'd be happy to actually work with you on that, is, put a Google Doc up and we iterate on that press release so that once the book is written, you say, yeah, this is who it's for, and this is how people should decide if they want to read it, and how they should know, I can see, like, I have a friend who is out of prison, had massive trauma, still believes in God, but is really burnt out on Christianity. Totally understandable.
Yeah.
And, and I talk to him as best I can, but like, he is in a different world. Like, I would love for you to write a book that I could give to my friend that would speak to him at his level. And he's, more educated, he's got a degree and stuff like that, but he comes from really, really hard scrabble roots. And so he's always felt like a foreigner in my world. And actually, this is actually and this is the other piece that is, I think, really unusual, that if you can figure out how to position it would be transformational, is that you're in love with Jesus, right? And, it's the, I think Rich Mullins called it the ragamuffin gospel, of which we don't have enough of, right? We have the institutional gospel, and we kind of have the self-made man gospel, right? Even though we're outside the institutional church, they tend to have their own big structures that they built around themselves. And this idea of a sort of grassroots gospel, I wanted to say redneck gospel, that may not be the right word, but like, there's something there, which is a story that needs to be told, that I don't think is being told.
Right.
And it's the sort of thing that it's the, for lack of a better word, it's the Jeff Foxworthy audience. It's the people who are kind of proud about being rednecks, and, would love but, they don't like all the fancy talk that they get if they go to a counselor or a preacher or whatever. But they got real problems, and all their pals have the same problems and don't want to talk about it. So there's something there, and none of them would even dream of writing a book.
Right.
So to be the guy that they can see themselves in, who wrote a book about it, and shares the story of Jesus in a way like, oh my God, like, I've been to church every Sunday my whole life, but I never knew Jesus could do that for me.
Right.
That's a story worth telling. And that's a story that other people like me would say, I'm not your target audience, but I bump into people who are. It would be awesome if I had a book like that I could share.
Right.
And
that brings up a good point, because of my background of sports, and being like a blue collar guy, that sports and that type of environment, that people don't really look at being a manly man. That's how, like, the environment I was raised up in, and like, for me to now be where I am and be comfortable and understanding things the way that I do, and talk about my feelings and things like that, I think that you're right, that I could, that's really ringing some bells for me, that bringing it to that type of audience would really benefit.
Yeah. So I think that's probably a good place to wrap up, so I don't overload either of our brains, is like, I think that's a good work product to like, for us to work on, is the press release for the book. And I think that will, and the title will usually come at the end. You will have like a handful of working titles to think about, unless one absolutely zings us early on. But the old saying is, we're told not to judge a book by a cover, but everyone judges books by their covers, even on Amazon, right? And so that's what the publisher does. The author writes the interior, but the publisher writes the title, the cover, the endorsements, the summary. Those are all the things that make someone pick up a book and read it or give it to someone else, is the outside of the book.
Mm.
And so doing the work of the publisher to think that through. I do know some people who are publishers in various levels. None of them big, mostly like small indie publishers, but who might actually be interested in working with you in some context, depending on how the book turns out. And that's another reason for writing a press release, is that you can actually send that to actual publishers. I mean, it's not inconceivable that there's an actual publisher who would want to publish your book, right? Although it's also entirely possible that it's just too true, because all publishers have their own, institutional inertia and their worldview, and they need their ideal author to look a certain way for them to feel comfortable that they can promote it to their traditional audiences. So it's more interesting to me if you can't find a traditional publisher, but if you could find a marginal publisher who's willing to like dig into your story and help you find your tribe, that would be, helping with some of the mechanics. And that could be an interesting thing. And, the fact that you haven't written a book actually makes it easier, because I don't know if you said you've written one book before your memoirs?
No, I'm familiar with writing, but yeah, I haven't written any books or anything.
So the biggest problem is that once you write something, you get emotionally attached to it.
Right.
And then, what is it? Good writers have to kill their own children. Right? Is you write a sentence that's beautiful, but you have to take it out because it destroys the paragraph.
Right. Okay.
Right. And so the editing process is brutal. And therefore, the clearer you can be about some of the hard choices, about who the audience is, what the tone is, the level of detail, and nail those down ahead of time. We call this, at Apple, we would call this the design brief. Why am I writing this thing? Like, who's the audience? What's the goal? And it's probably worth thinking about, like, okay, your target audience, Bubba, right? When would he actually buy a book? Or if he wouldn't buy a book, if his wife bought him a book, what would make him actually read it? Like, if you can solve that problem, that would be huge, right? Because like the audience you're describing, they're probably not targeted by books because they don't buy books.
Right.
Not a cultural thing. At least men don't. Women, I think, might still do that in that place. But I think my personal bias is a lot of people write books for women. Very few people write books for men about real stuff. But there are prison ministries, arguably prison ministries are actually probably one of the people who read books, men who read books
are in prison.
Are in prison, yes, right? That is actually probably your first and best market, because if you can find a prison ministry that will distribute your books, or even purchase the books, or even publish the books, I don't even know. It could be. I haven't looked at. I could imagine there are places that publish books because they have prisoners who are stuck there with very little to read that speaks to them. I don't know if there's enough. Prison Fellowship or some of these places might have a publishing. I don't know, but like that seems like the most likely place to find I hate to say the word, captive audience.
Yeah.
And what's interesting when I think about that, I think, wow, we have prison problems. So does the rest of the world. This is something that could actually probably translate really well, like certainly to Spanish, but I can imagine many other parts of the world where, yeah. So in terms of podcasts you've been on, have you been on like self-help podcasts or prison podcasts, or what's the?
I've been on one that was like a prison podcast, but like self-help, I've been on a bunch of different ones. Like Refuge Freedom Stories, that hasn't come out yet. That'll be on a while.
Mine just came out
Perseverance.
my Refuge Freedom Story just came out on February 14th.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
Professor Perseverance. I've been on different things like that. That it's an overcoming story.
yeah,
So yeah, I've been most of the ones that I've been on have been like in the conspiracy theory type of
yeah,
atmosphere or the spiritual new agey type of atmosphere.
yeah,
So that's kind of where I've been at so
yeah.
far.
It's fascinating to me, and I don't know for sure which way this will go, but like I certainly think that the prisoner ex-prisoner community is a place. They don't have a lot of money, but there are institutions who serve them who could help seed stuff. The really interesting thing for me, and this is a stretch, and I don't know if it would work, but it's really the blue collar Bible Belt guy who's had a rough life and doesn't have any place he can talk about it with.
Right.
You know, that's one of the things that is, and that's just my heart because of my background, is the people who are um, really want to be Christians and they enjoy being part of the Christian community, but it doesn't actually really work for them, but they don't know
Mm.
where else to go.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I am geographically too,
Yeah,
in
I mean, the Bible
the
Belt.
Bible Belt.
Yeah. And so I don't know, whether your level of trauma or your sort of psychedelic journey would be a draw or repulsion
Right.
for
I
that
think that might
crowd.
be like the second book might be more geared toward it's because as soon as you said that, that was like in my mind, I was like, that might be a different book.
Right. And that's one of the things, that's one of the hard choices you want to make up front is who are you going after with this one? And the more you can pre uh, decide who you're not going to worry about. Like
Right.
the people who are, like I need to have people who are going to be okay with this, this, and this. And for those people, if they meet those criteria, everything else, that distracts from that, I will leave out to make sure that it reaches this on. And that and this is the difference between, for short, the amateur and the professional. The amateur does it for himself. The professional does it for other people.
Hmm.
And I think that's the interesting mindset I'm proposing you adopt. Is I
So
think you have many great books in you, but
can I
yeah,
can I ask, do you think that maybe I should tailor make because my story is so comprehensive that I could break it down into a sexual trauma book, into a overcoming prison book, into an overcoming addiction, several different books within my one story rather than try to fit all of these different things in that one story. That would be maybe more
that's
difficult, but it
a
might be an
great
easier
question.
read.
This is the um, let me put it this way. I've often felt that I've got one great novel in me. I just don't know how many crappy novels I have to write first before that one great novel comes out. And I think the question you want to ask yourself is, do I want to write this one book as the best thing it could possibly be, even if it's the only thing I write? Or do I want to write this as a stepping stone to something later?
Hmm.
And my sense is that both are totally appropriate paths, but you need to kind of pick one.
Right.
Like,
Okay.
I've done training things where I said, like, okay, this podcast, I'm not serious. So I'm just going to do it because I want to get it out there and just go through the full life cycle so I know how it works.
Right.
And that's fine. But if you're not doing that, if you want to do that, like writing a book just to bang it out as quickly as possible and get it out the door, go for it. Right. But it's like, no, if the reason is like there's something burning within me that I have to put in a book. And if that's the case, then you figure out, okay, what is that burning thing? And you write that book.
Okay.
Right? And you may end up doing follow-ons focused on different things, but you got to find the thing. There's this wonderful video they have on Disney Plus about Pixar's creative process. And what they do is they ask the director to try and dig deep into what makes them, what is uniquely them, their experiences, their perspectives, their traumas, their fears, their hopes, or whatever, and put it all on noteboards. And you try and find the things that really deeply resonate with you, and then you'll have to turn it into a story that resonates with other people. And the director of, I forget which movie it was doing all these note cards, and he was sitting there with the assistant and like had a whole bulletin board full of note cards with all of his personal issues. Oh, it was of Onward, the one about the elves and the older brother. Anyway, but and when he was done for the day, the assistant said, "Do you want to like cover it up with a cloth or something? Because like this is all your personal." He goes, "No, it's fine. It's all gonna be in the movie anyway." And he was walking out there. He said, "Oh wait, crap!" And he went back and he turned over 2 of the cards that he didn't want anybody else to see. And as soon as he did that, he goes, "Ah, that's what the movie is about."
Hmm.
It is the deepest, most uncomfortable thing that, you know, he like is embarrassed to even admit as an issue. That was the thing that became the emotional heart of the movie.
Wow.
And I think that and that's what we keep trying to end. I'll try and end on this one, is thinking about like, what is the thing that if you could figure out a way to put it into words, to create this little seed that'll go to somebody else, then that would be worth it. If people got just that one seed, and then you figure out, you know, the whole tree that grows out of that seed and how you trim the branches so that it fits into a book. But I think thinking about what is the one big thing that, you know, is the thing that if the book didn't capture this, you would feel like you failed. But if it just nailed that one thing, it's like, yeah, this was totally worth it. Because writing a book is like giving birth. I think it's the closest men can come to that, because it's all inside of you and it's labor. And getting to the end, and then it goes out in the world and God knows what'll happen to it. Right?
Good
And
analogy.
so, you know, it is and so if you're going to do it, you may as well do it right.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it's like either do it right or do it for practice. Like there is no third option. Right?
Right.
You either figure out what is the deepest thing you want to say, and maybe like so before we do the press release for the outside world, try to come up with one sentence of the punchline of the book.
Okay.
Like, what is the thing, like, I'm writing this book because boom, or you should read this book because, or this happened to me, which is why I have to write this book.
Yeah, what's
And
coming to mind is overcoming. You know, it has to
overcoming,
be
right? But overcoming what, right? And I think
right.
the thing that I get from your story is that you have stared into the heart of the abyss, and then Jesus met you there.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that is quite rare. And I'll send you my story where I have that happen to one of my characters. And so I think overcoming is a good word. And then there's the what you overcome, and then there's the how you overcame. And that those 3 things together could become a sentence, which could become the seed of the book.
Okay.
So think about that. So yeah, we'll make that so I'll send you a link to my story in case it's helpful. You can ignore it if it's not. But then try to think about a sentence, and then you can chat me or email me or whatever. And we'll take it from there.
All right. Well, thank you so much. This was an honor to be invited on and to talk to you. And you gave me a lot to think about and direction with how, because with me, you know, it's just, oh, a book. And I didn't think about all these other things. And I'm glad I haven't started writing yet, because it's just been, right now, it's just thought and idea. And I haven't put pen to paper or, you know, keyboard to, or my fingers to the keyboards just yet about it. So this will give me a very direct sense in where I want to go and how I want to move about. So I'm very honored and appreciative that you would do this for me.
Well, yeah, you know, I've been thinking about how I define this role, and there's a thing that people do called spiritual directors. I don't know if you've heard that phrase.
I have not.
It's mostly in like the traditional Catholic Church. They have a spiritual director who's like the person you go to tell you kind of like when you're stuck, which way to go, right?
Right. Okay.
And spiritual formation, another word people use in that space. I never liked that phrase personally. I've been playing with the phrase spiritual agent.
Hmm.
Like I'm not the one who's going to like tell you what to do. I'm here to help you figure out what it is you want to do, and then prepare you to be able to do it better, and then connect you to the resources so you can pull it off. And so actually, I kind of feel like I am kind of like a book agent in this role. Is
Yeah.
that, to see if we can, and actually that's not a bad um, metaphor to use, is like, hey, let's see, the goal is to figure out, is to find a publisher, whether it's like a real publisher is going to give you an advance or anything, or just a guy who say like, if you write this book, I will help you get it printed, and I will send copies to, help you figure out the right people to send it to, so that they know that it exists.
Right. Okay.
I have a friend who does some of this in a slightly different adjacent space, but you know, it's at least it's a starting point. And even the exercise of going through it and meeting those people would be interesting, I think, and
Yeah.
help you refine that. All right. And last thing is that I've been recording this for my YouTube channel. I don't think there's anything terribly sensitive or unusual here. If you're comfortable with me posting it, this is kind of how I build my oeuvre of work.
Yeah. Absolutely. I would be honored to be on your
I
YouTube channel.
have to figure out which YouTube channel to put it on, but I'll figure that out at some point. All right. Well, God bless you. Let me just pray for you real quick, and we will
Yeah.
call it a day. God, I just thank you for Todd, and I thank you that he is a king's man. Lord, he has been in the depths of the trenches and the latrines, and yet you have called him to be your soldier, and not to be a general, not to be a colonel, not even to be a captain or maybe even an officer, but to just be in the trenches as a faithful soldier, sharing his story with others who are desperate for hope. And Lord, I thank you that you've placed this desire for a book in him. And I believe that there is something here that would really be transformational to those who read it. And I pray that you would help us to midwife this process well, that the seed you've planted within him will grow and be nurtured and come to bear a ripe fruit for your kingdom and for transformed lives. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, my friend.
All right. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.